Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, here goes nothing. This is something I've never told anyone, not even my closest friends. It's a messy, embarrassing, and deeply unsettling part of my past that I've tried to bury, but it keeps clawing its way back to the surface. It's about a catfish love story, but not the kind where I was the one getting catfished. I was the catfish. It started during the summer after my freshman year of college. I was bored, lonely, and feeling incredibly insecure. All my high school friends were off having amazing adventures, posting pictures of beaches, parties, and new relationships. Meanwhile, I was stuck at home, working a dead-end job at the local grocery store, feeling like I was missing out on everything. That's when I stumbled upon this online forum dedicated to a niche interest of mine, collecting vintage postcards. I'd been collecting since I was a kid, inheriting the hobby from my grandmother. The forum was a vibrant community, full of people who shared my passion. I created a profile, using my real name and a picture of myself, and started participating in discussions. One day, a user with the handle OldSoul72 reached out to me. He complimented my knowledge of early 20th century travel postcards and invited me to chat privately. I was flattered. He seemed genuinely interested in my collection and my opinions. We started messaging each other regularly, talking about postcards, history, and eventually our lives. OldSoul72 told me his name was Michael, and he was a retired history professor in his late 60s. He lived in a small town in Vermont, surrounded by antique shops and beautiful scenery. He described his life as quiet but fulfilling, filled with reading, gardening, and, of course, collecting postcards. The more we talked, the more I started to develop a crush on him. He was intelligent, witty, and incredibly kind. He listened to my anxieties about college, offered advice about my career aspirations, and made me feel seen and understood in a way that no one else ever had. He even wrote me poetry, beautiful verses about nature and the passage of time. Looking back, I can see all the red flags. He never sent me a picture of himself, claiming he wasn't comfortable with technology. He avoided video calls, saying his internet connection was unreliable. But I was blinded by my infatuation. I wanted to believe he was who he said he was. One day, Michael told me he was going through a difficult time. His health was declining, and he was feeling isolated and lonely. He confided in me that I was the only person who truly understood him, and that our conversations were the highlight of his days. That's when the idea popped into my head. A terrible, selfish idea that I still regret to this day. What if I could create a fake profile, a younger, more attractive version of myself, and use it to cheer him up? I told myself it was just a harmless way to boost his spirits, to give him something to look forward to. I found pictures of a woman online, let's call her Sarah, who was everything I wasn't. She was blonde, blue-eyed, and had a radiant smile. I created a profile on a dating site, using Sarah's pictures and a fake name, Lily. I described her as a young, free-spirited artist who loved history and old things. Then I reached out to Michael, using the Lily persona. I mirrored his interests, praised his intellect, and flirted with him shamelessly. I sent him pictures of myself painting, hiking, and visiting antique shops. I even wrote him poetry, plagiarizing verses from famous poets and passing them off as my own. He was immediately smitten. He told Lily that she was the most beautiful and fascinating woman he had ever met. He sent her virtual gifts, wrote her love letters, and even started talking about the possibility of meeting in person. Meanwhile, I continued to communicate with him as myself, offering support and encouragement as he navigated his health problems. I even mentioned Lily to him, telling him about this amazing woman I'd met online who shared his passion for history. He was delighted, saying it was wonderful that there were still young people who appreciated the past. The double life was exhausting and morally reprehensible, but I couldn't stop. I was addicted to the attention, to the validation, to the feeling of being desired. I reveled in the power I held over Michael, manipulating his emotions with my lies. Things started to unravel when Michael suggested a video call with Lily. I panicked. I made up excuses, claiming I was traveling, that my webcam was broken, that I was too nervous to show my face. But he was persistent, and I knew I couldn't keep avoiding him forever. Desperate, I reached out to a friend who was good with computers. I begged him to help me create a fake video call, using a pre-recorded video of Sarah and a voice modulator to mimic my own voice. He reluctantly agreed, warning me that what I was doing was wrong and that I needed to come clean. The fake video call was a disaster. The video was choppy, the audio was distorted, and Michael seemed suspicious. He asked Lily questions that I couldn't answer, probing for inconsistencies in my story. I ended the call abruptly, claiming my internet connection was failing. After that, Michael became distant. He stopped messaging me as Lily, and his communication with me as myself became infrequent and impersonal. I knew he was onto me, that he had figured out the truth. Finally, one day, he sent me a message. It was short and to the point. "I know what you did. I'm deeply hurt and disappointed. Please don't contact me again." I was devastated. I tried to apologize, to explain my actions, but he wouldn't listen. He blocked me on all platforms, cutting me out of his life completely. The guilt and shame consumed me. I realized the extent of my betrayal, the damage I had caused to someone who had only shown me kindness and affection. I had used him, manipulated him, and lied to him for my own selfish gratification. I never heard from Michael again. I tried to find him online, but he had disappeared. I don't know if he's still alive, if he ever found happiness, or if he ever forgave me. To this day, I regret what I did. It was a cruel and thoughtless act that haunts me. I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online deception and the importance of being honest and authentic, even when it's difficult. I know that sharing this confession won't undo the harm I caused, but I hope that by admitting my wrongdoing, I can at least begin to atone for my sins. I hope that Michael, wherever he is, knows that I am truly sorry for what I did, and I hope that my story serves as a warning to others who are tempted to create fake personas online, to remember that their actions have real consequences and can cause real pain. It's been a long time, but the digital world never forgets, and neither do I. I can only hope that one day, I can find a way to forgive myself. I've never told this to anyone. Not my best friend, not my therapist, not even my dog who listens to everything. It's a confession, a story about a catfish love story gone sideways, and it's a big one. I was the catfish. It started innocently enough. A stupid, lonely night in my dorm room, scrolling through a dating app. I was a freshman in college, painfully shy, and felt like everyone else was having these amazing romantic experiences that I was missing out on. I swiped left so many times that my thumb started to hurt. Then I saw him. Liam. Gorgeous. Dark hair, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. He was exactly my type, but way out of my league. Or so I thought. We matched. My heart did a weird flutter thing that I'd only read about in books. We started chatting, and it was amazing. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He asked about my classes, my hobbies, my dreams. I found myself pouring my heart out to him, something I'd never done with anyone before. I was head over heels almost immediately. Here's where it gets ugly. Liam was a photographer, but he was always traveling for work. This meant, conveniently, that we could only text and video chat occasionally. And here's the first red flag I chose to ignore. I was too excited and was too naive to notice this obvious indicator. I knew I needed a profile picture, and I was so nervous about how I looked. I hated my crooked teeth, my frizzy hair, and my perpetual awkwardness. So, I did something I deeply regret. I Googled attractive girl and found a picture of this stunning woman with flowing blonde hair and the kind of smile that could light up a room. I saved it and made it my profile picture. I know. It was awful. The thing is, once I'd done it, I couldn't take it back. Liam started calling me Sarah, the name I'd given the fake profile, and he fell in love with the image of this perfect girl. I told myself it was just temporary, that eventually I'd tell him the truth. But I was scared. What if he rejected me? What if he was disgusted? I convinced myself that my personality was what mattered, and that once he got to know the real me, he wouldn't care about the pictures. Months went by. Liam and I texted constantly. We had these deep, philosophical conversations that kept me up all night. I felt more connected to him than I had ever felt to anyone. He told me he loved me. I told him I loved him too. Except he loved Sarah, and I was just pretending to be her. The guilt was eating me alive, but I couldn't bring myself to end it. I was addicted to the attention, the validation, the feeling of being loved. Then, Liam announced he was coming home. His photography assignment was over, and he wanted to meet me. In person. My stomach dropped. I had no idea what to do. I made up excuses. I was busy with school. I had a family emergency. I postponed the meeting for weeks, hoping he'd just give up. But he didn't. He was persistent, and he was starting to get suspicious. One night, he video called me unexpectedly. I panicked. I told him I couldn't answer because I was in the shower. He said he'd wait. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the mirror. This had gone on long enough. I knew I had to tell him the truth. I typed out a long, rambling message explaining everything. I confessed my insecurities, my fears, my desperate desire to be loved. I told him the real reason I couldn't meet him. I sent the message and then threw my phone across the room. I didn't hear from him for days. I was a mess. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just cried. I imagined all the terrible things he must be thinking about me. I deserved it. Finally, I got a text. It was Liam. He said he needed time to process everything. He said he was hurt, betrayed, and confused. He also said he still wanted to talk. We talked. For hours. He was angry, but he was also understanding. He said he was initially drawn to the pictures, but it was our conversations, our connection, that had made him fall in love. He admitted he was disappointed, but he also recognized that I was just a scared, insecure girl who made a terrible mistake. He wanted to know why I didn't trust him with the real me, the me under all the layers of deception. It was a long, painful conversation. I told him everything, my lifelong struggle with self-esteem, my fear of rejection, my desperate longing for connection. Here is where things get weirder. After days of discussion, tears, and apologies, Liam proposed something completely unexpected. He said he still wanted to meet me. He still wanted to see if our connection was real, regardless of the fake profile. He said he was willing to give me a chance to prove that I was more than just a catfish. He said he was willing to look past my deception and see the real me. I was stunned. I couldn't believe he was giving me this opportunity. I agreed, terrified but also hopeful. We set a date. A public park, neutral territory. I spent the next few days agonizing over what to wear, how to act, how to apologize again and again. I considered backing out 1,000,000 times, but I knew I had to face him. The day arrived. I was a nervous wreck. I got to the park early and sat on a bench, watching people walk by. Every time I saw a guy who looked remotely like Liam, my heart jumped. Then I saw him. He was even more handsome in person. He walked towards me, a hesitant smile on his face. I stood up, my legs shaking. Liam, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah, he replied, his eyes searching mine. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. The tension was palpable. Then he took a deep breath and said, So, you're not blonde. I laughed a nervous, shaky laugh. No, I said, I'm definitely not blonde. We sat down on the bench and talked. For hours. It was awkward at first, but gradually, the conversation flowed. We talked about everything. The weather, our families, our fears, our dreams. We talked about the catfish incident. I apologized profusely, and he accepted my apology. He asked me questions about myself, and I answered honestly, without hiding behind a fake persona. He even pulled up the fake profile picture, and we laughed about how ridiculous it was. To my surprise, I started to relax. I started to feel comfortable. I started to feel like myself. And Liam, he seemed to be enjoying himself too. He laughed at my jokes. He listened intently when I spoke. He made eye contact and smiled. As the sun began to set, he reached out and took my hand. You know, he said, you're nothing like I expected, but in a good way. I blushed. Really? I asked. Really, he said. I think I like the real you even more than I like Sarah. We continued to see each other. It wasn't easy. There were trust issues to overcome, and I had to work hard to prove that I was trustworthy. But Liam was patient and understanding. He gave me the chance to earn his trust back, and I did everything I could to show him that I deserved it. And here is the real confession. We dated for 2 years. 2 amazing, wonderful years. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Kind, supportive, intelligent, and funny. He helped me grow as a person. He taught me to love myself. He showed me what it meant to be truly loved. And then, I broke up with him. I know it sounds crazy. After all that, after he forgave me for catfishing him, after we built a real, meaningful relationship, I ended it. The truth is, I couldn't shake the guilt. Every time he looked at me with love in his eyes, I was reminded of how I'd initially deceived him. I felt like I was living a lie, even though our relationship was genuine. I didn't feel like I deserved the person who forgave all of my faults. I was constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to realize that I wasn't good enough for him. It was unfair to him, and it was unfair to me. I realized that I couldn't truly move on until I faced my own demons and forgave myself for what I'd done. I had to spend some time alone, working on my self-esteem, learning to love myself without needing validation from others. Breaking up with Liam was the hardest thing I've ever done. It broke both our hearts. He didn't understand why I was doing it, and I couldn't fully explain it to him. I just knew that I needed to do it for myself, and for him. It's been 5 years since then. I'm still single. I've been in therapy, working on my self-esteem issues. I've learned to love myself, flaws and all. I still think about Liam sometimes. I wonder if he's happy. I wonder if he ever thinks about me. I know I messed up. I hurt someone I cared about deeply, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I've learned a valuable lesson. Honesty is always the best policy, and you can't build a real relationship on a foundation of lies. I will never forget him. This is my confession. I hope that by sharing my story, I can help someone else avoid making the same mistake. And maybe, just maybe, it will help me finally forgive myself. Here goes nothing. I've never told this to another soul. It's embarrassing, humiliating, and honestly, kind of messed up. I don't even know why I'm typing this out now. But the secret has been rotting me from the inside out for the past 7 years, and maybe, just maybe, getting it out there will finally set me free. It all started in the summer after high school. I was bored, lonely, and spending way too much time online. I stumbled upon this forum dedicated to indie music, and I started posting regularly, trying to connect with people who shared my taste. That's where I met Liam. Liam was everything I wasn't. He was witty, charming, and incredibly well-read. He lived in Los Angeles, working as a freelance photographer, which sounded impossibly glamorous to my small-town self. We started messaging each other privately, and soon, those messages turned into late-night chats. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our favorite bands, our families. He told me about his difficult childhood, his passion for capturing the perfect image, his struggles with anxiety. I poured my heart out to him, too, sharing secrets I'd never dared to voice to anyone in real life. He listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding. He made me feel seen, heard, and valued in a way that no one ever had before. I fell hard and fast. It was a classic catfish scenario. I know that now. But back then, I was blinded by the attention, the connection, the fantasy of it all. He had a profile picture, of course, a grainy, slightly blurry image of a guy with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. I reverse image searched it 1,000,000 times, but nothing ever came up. He said he wasn't big on social media, which I initially found refreshing. Red flags everywhere, I know. But love, or what I thought was love, is a powerful drug. We talked for hours, every day for months. I was completely consumed by him. My grades slipped, I distanced myself from my friends, and I spent every waking moment glued to my computer screen, waiting for his messages. Then came the excuses. He couldn't video chat because his webcam was broken. He couldn't meet in person because he was constantly traveling for work. He couldn't even talk on the phone because his voice was raspy from a cold he couldn't shake. He always had a reason, and I, desperate to believe, always accepted them. The longer it went on, the more suspicious I became. But I was so afraid of losing him that I refused to confront him directly. I started creating elaborate scenarios in my head to explain his behavior. Maybe he was in witness protection. Maybe he was secretly famous and didn't want me to know. Maybe he was just incredibly shy and insecure. Anything was possible, right? One day, he told me he was coming to my town for a photography assignment. My heart leaped. Finally, after all this time, we were going to meet. I spent weeks planning our date, agonizing over what to wear, what to say, how to act. I wanted everything to be perfect. The day arrived, and I waited at the designated meeting spot, a small coffee shop downtown. I watched every person who walked through the door, my anxiety building with each passing minute. Hours went by, and Liam never showed. I tried calling and texting him, but he didn't respond. I sat there until the coffee shop closed, tears streaming down my face, feeling like the biggest fool on earth. He finally messaged me the next day, with some lame excuse about a family emergency. I was furious, hurt, and utterly devastated. I confronted him, demanding to know why he couldn't be honest with me. He apologized profusely, claiming he was scared of ruining what we had. I told him I couldn't do this anymore. I needed to see him, to hear his voice, to know that he was real. He promised he would make it up to me, that he would prove his love for me. Foolishly, I gave him another chance. And that's where things took a really dark turn. Instead of coming clean, instead of revealing his true identity, he doubled down on the lie. He started sending me gifts, expensive jewelry, concert tickets, even a plane ticket to Los Angeles. He said he wanted to show me how much he cared, to make me feel like the princess I deserved to be. I knew it was wrong, that I should cut ties and move on, but I was so addicted to the attention, the romance, the fantasy that I couldn't bring myself to do it. The gifts were a distraction, a way to keep me hooked while avoiding any real-life interaction. And then he asked me for money. He claimed he was in a financial bind, that he needed a loan to cover some unexpected expenses. He promised to pay me back as soon as he got his next paycheck. I was hesitant, but he played on my emotions, reminding me of all the times he had supported me, how he was always there for me when I needed him. I caved. I sent him a few $100s, telling myself it was an investment in our future. Of course, he never paid me back, and he kept asking for more. Each time, the amounts got larger, and his excuses got more elaborate. He was facing eviction. His car had broken down. His mother was sick and needed medical treatment. I knew I was being scammed, but I couldn't stop myself. I was so emotionally invested in this fake relationship that I was willing to do anything to keep it alive. Over the next few months, I sent him thousands of dollars. I maxed out my credit cards, emptied my savings account, and even borrowed money from my parents, lying about needing it for school expenses. I was drowning in debt, and I was too ashamed to tell anyone what was happening. The guilt was overwhelming, but I kept telling myself that it would all be worth it in the end, that once we finally met, everything would be okay. But it wasn't okay. It was far from okay. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a woman claiming to be Liam's sister. She said Liam had been in a car accident and was in critical condition. She needed money to cover his medical bills. My world shattered. I sent her every last cent I had, praying that he would pull through. A few days later, she messaged me again, saying Liam had passed away. She thanked me for my love and support, saying I was the most important person in his life. I was devastated. I grieved for a man who never existed, a man who had manipulated and exploited me for his own gain. I felt like a complete idiot, a gullible fool who had fallen for the oldest trick in the book. After a few weeks, I got a message from Liam. Sorry I had to pretend to be dead, but I needed to get you to send money. I have thought about this moment every day since. My mind went blank, my vision started fading, and I had to take a seat before I fell over. I had been so stupid. Years later, I found his profile still up on a forum. I have no idea who he is. I still cry when I think about it. I still feel all of those emotions. I lost friendships. My school life was over, and I had to start fresh with a new school. I was so ashamed of what happened, and I was also angry. I was angry at myself for letting this happen and angry at this person for doing this. I now have problems trusting. To this day, I have never dated anyone. I have a hard time with intimacy, and I get panic attacks in crowds. I don't know what kind of person could do what he did to me. But I can tell you this, I will never ever put myself in this type of situation again. Ever. I've been holding on to this for almost a decade now, and the weight of it is just crushing. It's a story about deception, loneliness, and the tangled mess that can happen when you're not honest with yourself, let alone others. It's a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on TV. There's no grand reveal, no screaming match, just a quiet, slow burn of guilt that's been eating me alive. It started during my freshman year of college. I was painfully shy, awkward, and hadn't even had my first kiss yet. College was supposed to be this great adventure, a chance to reinvent myself, but I just felt more lost and alone than ever. I spent most of my free time holed up in my dorm room, scrolling through social media and envying everyone else's seemingly perfect lives. Then, I stumbled upon this online forum dedicated to a book series I was obsessed with at the time. It was a tight-knit community of fans, and I started lurking, reading their discussions, and feeling a small sense of belonging. Eventually, I decided to create an account. I wanted to participate, to connect with these people who shared my interests. But the fear of judgment was overwhelming. What if they didn't like me? What if I said something stupid? So, I did something I deeply regret. I created a fake profile. I called myself Alex, and I built a persona around the qualities I wished I possessed. Alex was confident, witty, and effortlessly cool. I used pictures of a model I found online, a guy with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. He was everything I wasn't. On the forum, Alex was a hit. People loved his witty comments, his insightful analysis of the books, and his overall charismatic personality. I spent hours crafting his online presence, carefully curating his posts and messages to maintain the illusion. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I was finally getting the attention and validation I craved, but it was all based on a lie. Then I met Sarah. She was another active member of the forum, and we started exchanging private messages. Sarah was smart, funny, and incredibly kind. We bonded over our shared love of the books, and our conversations quickly expanded to other topics: our dreams, our fears, our daily lives. I found myself looking forward to our chats more than anything else. With Alex, I could say anything, be anyone. There was no fear of rejection, no pressure to be perfect. As weeks turned into months, our connection deepened. We started exchanging emails, then moved on to texting. I knew it was wrong, that I was leading her on, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Sarah thought she was falling in love with Alex, this perfect guy I had created. And honestly, I was falling in love with her too, with the real her, the Sarah behind the screen. It was a twisted, messed up situation, but in my lonely world, it felt like the only source of light. The guilt was always there, gnawing at me. Every time Sarah told me how much she liked Alex, every time she sent me a virtual kiss, I felt a pang of shame. I knew I had to tell her the truth, but I was terrified of losing her. I convinced myself that I would do it soon, after this exam, after this holiday, after there was always an excuse. One day, Sarah suggested we meet in person. She was visiting my city for a conference and wanted to grab coffee. My heart sank. There was no way I could go through with it. How could I face her, knowing the lie I had been living? I panicked and made up an excuse, saying that Alex was out of town on a family emergency. Sarah was disappointed but understanding. That was the closest I came to confessing. After that, I became even more withdrawn, even more consumed by guilt. I started avoiding Sarah's messages, hoping she would eventually lose interest. But she didn't. She was persistent, and her messages were filled with so much warmth and affection that I couldn't bring myself to cut her off completely. The charade continued for another year, and I was withering away inside. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. I was living a double life, and it was tearing me apart. I knew I had to end it, for both our sakes. I wrote Sarah a long email, pouring out my heart and confessing everything. I told her about my insecurities, my loneliness, and how I had created Alex as a way to escape my own reality. I explained how much I cared for her, how much I regretted my deception, and how I understood if she never wanted to speak to me again. Then, I hit send and waited. The next few days were agonizing. I barely ate, barely slept. I kept refreshing my inbox, praying for a response, any response. But nothing. Sarah never replied. I tried reaching out to her on the forum, but she had deactivated her account. I searched for her on social media, but couldn't find her anywhere. It was like she had vanished from the face of the earth. A part of me understood. I had hurt her deeply, and she had every right to cut me out of her life. But another part of me desperately wanted to apologize, to explain myself, to somehow make amends. Years passed, and I never heard from Sarah again. I often wonder what happened to her, if she's happy, if she ever thinks about Alex. I still feel guilty about what I did, about the pain I caused her. It was a selfish and cowardly act, and I'll never forgive myself for it. I learned a hard lesson about the importance of honesty and the dangers of hiding behind a false persona. I vowed to never lie about myself again, to embrace my imperfections, and to be authentic in all my interactions. It wasn't easy, but I worked hard to become a better person, someone worthy of trust and respect. but the shadow of Alex still lingers. Every now and then, I catch myself thinking about Sarah, about what could have been if I had been honest from the start. I know I can't change the past, but I can learn from it, and I can use my experience to help others avoid making the same mistakes. That's why I'm finally sharing this story, even though it's incredibly painful to relive. I hope that by confessing my sins, I can somehow lighten the burden of guilt I've been carrying for so long. And maybe, just maybe, Sarah will somehow stumble upon this confession and know that I'm truly sorry. I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted to be loved, and I went about it in the worst possible way. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me, but I hope she can understand that I've changed. I'm no longer the scared, insecure kid who created Alex. I'm a different person now, a person who values honesty and authenticity above all else. If you're reading this, Sarah, I want you to know that I think about you often. You were a bright light in a dark time of my life, and I'll always cherish the memories we shared, even if they were based on a lie. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you found happiness, and I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I never deserved you. I know that now. This is my confession. I hope it brings me some peace, and I hope it serves as a warning to others who might be tempted to create a false online identity. It's not worth the pain and guilt it will ultimately cause. Be true to yourself and be honest with others. It's the only way to build genuine connections and find real happiness. And to Sarah, wherever you are, I'm sorry. From the bottom of my heart, I am truly sorry. The truth is, I've been hiding something for almost a decade now. Something that gnaws at me in the quiet hours of the night. A secret I've built my life around, brick by painstaking brick. It started like so many other online romances, with a fake profile and a stolen picture. But it spiraled into something so much bigger, so much more intricate, and well, real, that sometimes I forget the foundation it was built on is a lie. I was a lonely kid, awkward, introverted, and utterly invisible in high school. My escape was the internet, specifically online gaming forums. It was there, hidden behind a carefully crafted username and a generic avatar, that I felt like I could be someone else, someone cooler. That's where Jake was born. Jake was everything I wasn't: confident, witty, athletic. He was based on a composite of every popular guy I envied in high school. The picture I used was of a stock photo model, someone vaguely resembling what I imagined Jake would look like. I know it's cliché, but back then, I wasn't thinking about consequences. I just wanted to connect with people, to feel like I belonged. It started innocently enough. I posted on the forums, made friends, joined guilds. Jake was well-liked, a valued member of the online community. He was the kind of guy people turned to for advice, the one who always had a funny meme or a supportive word. And then I met Sarah. She was also a regular on the forums, a skilled gamer with a sharp wit and a sarcastic sense of humor that perfectly complemented Jake's. We started chatting privately, sharing our thoughts and feelings about everything and nothing. Late nights turned into early mornings as we talked about our dreams, our fears, our families. I fell hard and I fell fast. And incredibly, it seemed like Sarah was falling for Jake too. The problem, of course, was that Jake wasn't real. He was a carefully constructed facade, a character I played online. But Sarah didn't know that. She thought she was connecting with a confident, witty, athletic guy in the picture. The guilt started creeping in early on. I knew what I was doing was wrong, that I was deceiving her. But the thought of telling her the truth, of shattering the connection we had built, was terrifying. So I rationalized it. I told myself that as long as I was honest about my feelings, the physical appearance didn't matter. I convinced myself that she was falling for me, for the person behind the profile, not just the picture. And for a while it worked. We talked about everything except meeting in person. I always had an excuse. I was traveling. I was busy with work. I was dealing with a family emergency. I became a master of deflection, always promising a future meeting that never materialized. As the years went by, our relationship deepened. We shared major life events, graduations, new jobs, family illnesses. We supported each other through tough times, celebrated each other's successes. Sarah became my best friend, my confidant, the one person I could always count on. And the guilt grew heavier with each passing year. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade forever. The longer I waited, the more painful the eventual reveal would be. But I was trapped. I loved Sarah, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. So I kept lying. I created elaborate backstories for Jake, detailed narratives about his life, his job, his family. I even invented friends and acquaintances to corroborate my stories. It was exhausting, and it was morally reprehensible. But I was so deeply entrenched in the lie that I couldn't see a way out. Then, 5 years in, Sarah announced she was moving to my city. She had accepted a job offer and was excited to finally meet in person. Panic seized me. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment my carefully constructed world would come crashing down. I considered ghosting her, disappearing completely, and leaving her to wonder what happened to Jake. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't just abandon her after all we had been through. So I made a decision, a desperate, impulsive decision that would change everything. I decided to become Jake. I knew I couldn't magically transform myself into the stock photo model, but I could try to embody the qualities I had created for him online. I started working out obsessively, trying to sculpt my body into something resembling Jake's. I changed my hairstyle, my clothes, even the way I spoke. I practiced his mannerisms, his jokes, his online persona. It was a grotesque parody of self-improvement, a desperate attempt to become someone I wasn't. The day Sarah arrived, I was a nervous wreck. I waited for her at the airport, my heart pounding in my chest. When I saw her walk through the gate, my breath caught in my throat. She was even more beautiful in person than I had imagined. She saw me and smiled, her eyes lighting up. She ran towards me and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. "Jake, it's so good to finally meet you," she said, her voice filled with warmth and excitement. And just like that, I became Jake. I spent the next few weeks living a double life. During the day, I was myself, the awkward, introverted guy I had always been. But in the evenings, when I was with Sarah, I transformed into Jake, the confident, witty, athletic guy she had fallen in love with. It was exhausting, and it was terrifying. I was constantly afraid of slipping up, of saying or doing something that would reveal the truth. But somehow, I managed to pull it off. Sarah seemed happy, even more in love with me than she had been online. We went on dates, explored the city, and spent countless hours talking and laughing. I knew it couldn't last forever, but I allowed myself to enjoy the moment, to bask in the glow of her affection. Eventually, we moved in together. Sharing a life with Sarah as Jake became my new normal. I built a life around the lie. Years passed. We got engaged. Set a date. As things got more serious, my anxiety grew. I knew that marriage meant a lifetime of deception, a lifetime of pretending to be someone I wasn't. I still loved Sarah deeply, more than ever really, but I didn't know how much longer I could keep living this lie. She deserved someone who was completely honest with her. She deserved someone who was real, not this carefully constructed fabrication. The wedding is in 6 months. The invitations have been sent. The venue has been booked, and the dress has been chosen. Everyone is excited for us, especially Sarah. She thinks she's marrying the man of her dreams, the confident, witty, athletic guy she met online. She has no idea that the man she's about to marry is a fraud, a liar who has built his entire life on a foundation of deception. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to come clean, to tell her the truth and face the consequences. But another part of me is terrified of losing her, of shattering the life we have built together. I'm trapped between my love for her and my guilt over the lie. I know I can't keep living like this. I have to make a choice. But I don't know which choice is the right one. All I know is that the truth will eventually come out, one way or another. And when it does, it will change everything. Until then, I'll keep pretending. I'll keep playing the role of Jake, the man Sarah thinks she loves. And I'll keep praying that somehow, some way, everything will work out in the end. But deep down, I know that's just a fantasy built on a lie. I've always been a bit of a loner, never really fit in, always felt like I was watching life from behind a pane of glass. So, maybe that's why I fell so hard, so fast. It started like any other online romance these days, a dating app. Plenty of profiles to swipe through, endless possibilities at your fingertips. I was looking for something real, someone to connect with on a deeper level. And then I saw her profile. Sarah. Her pictures were stunning. Long, flowing auburn hair, piercing green eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. She described herself as an artist, someone who loved hiking and spending time in nature. We had so much in common, at least on paper. We started messaging, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. She was witty, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. It was intoxicating. Finally, someone who understood me. Someone who saw the real me, not the awkward, introverted guy I felt like I always was in real life. We moved from the app to texting, then to late-night phone calls. I found myself staying up until dawn, talking to her about everything and nothing. My hopes, my dreams, my fears. She listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and understanding. She made me feel seen, validated, loved, in a way I never had before. Within weeks, I was completely smitten. I knew it sounds crazy, falling for someone I'd never met in person, but it felt so real. The connection was undeniable. We talked about meeting up, but she always had an excuse. Work, family obligations, a cold she couldn't shake. I was understanding at first, but as time went on, the excuses started to wear thin. I wanted to see her, to hold her, to finally make this virtual relationship a reality. That's when the doubts started creeping in. Little inconsistencies in her stories. A reluctance to video chat, a strange aversion to talking about specific details of her life, red flags, waving frantically in my face, but I was too blinded by love to see them. Then came the request. Sarah explained that she was struggling financially. Her art supplies were expensive, and she was having trouble making ends meet. She asked if I could lend her some money. Just a small amount, she said, enough to tide her over until her next commission came through. I hesitated. It felt wrong, asking for money so early in a relationship, especially one that hadn't even progressed to the real world. But I was so in love with her. I trusted her, and I wanted to help. So I sent her the money. A few $100s, not a fortune, but enough to make me feel like I was investing in our future. She thanked me profusely, promising to pay me back as soon as she could. The money was wired out of my account as fast as the gratitude was sent back to me. And of course, it never came back. That was the first time. Over the next few months, the requests kept coming. A medical bill, a car repair, a family emergency. Each time, she'd weave a convincing story, tugging at my heartstrings until I couldn't refuse. I was sinking deeper and deeper into debt, but I couldn't bring myself to say no. I was afraid of losing her. What if she was going through some hard stuff? It was not a huge deal, I thought, so I kept sending her money, each month or week, for what it was, until it got to a breaking point in my bank account. And I knew she would pay me back, right? So I wouldn't stress. So the cycle continued. The turning point came when she asked for a large sum of money. She claimed her mother was seriously ill and needed an expensive operation. She was desperate, she said, and I was her only hope. It was thousands of dollars, more than I could afford. I had to take out a loan. The doubts were overwhelming now, but she swore she loved me, that we would spend our lives together once she was back on her feet. I wanted to believe her so badly. I wanted to see our dreams come true. So I did it. I took out the loan, sent her the money, and waited. And waited. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Sarah became increasingly distant. Her texts became shorter, her phone calls less frequent. Excuses piled up. I began to suspect I was being catfished. I started digging, doing some online research. I reverse image searched her photos and found them on a stock photo website. The artist she claimed to be didn't exist. The stories she'd told me about her life were all lies. I was devastated. I'd been so naive, so gullible. I'd fallen for a carefully crafted persona, a figment of someone's imagination. I confronted her with my findings. She denied it at first, but eventually, the truth came spilling out. She wasn't Sarah. She was a man named Michael, living in another state. He'd created the fake profile to scam lonely people out of their money. He apologized, claiming he'd never meant to hurt me, that he'd only been trying to make a living. I hung up the phone, numb with shock and anger. I'd been played, manipulated, and financially ruined. The worst part was, I'd let it happen. I'd ignored the red flags, dismissed my doubts, and allowed myself to be swept away by a fantasy. I was humiliated. I couldn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family. The shame was too much to bear. I sunk into a deep depression, isolating myself from the world. I lost my job because I couldn't focus. I struggled to pay my bills, the loan hanging over my head like a dark cloud. I considered ending it all. The weight of my mistakes was crushing me. But then something shifted. A flicker of anger ignited within me. I wasn't going to let this person destroy my life. I wasn't going to let him get away with what he'd done. I started researching online scams, learning about the different ways people were being conned. I contacted the police and reported the incident. They said there was little they could do since I'd willingly sent the money. But I refused to give up. I found other victims of Michael online, people who had been scammed in the same way. We shared our stories, offered each other support, and vowed to bring him to justice. Together, we gathered evidence, tracked his online activity, and eventually, we were able to locate him. We provided the information to the authorities, and they launched an investigation. A few months later, Michael was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and identity theft. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. It wasn't a complete victory. I still had to deal with the financial fallout of the scam, but I felt a sense of closure, of justice being served. But that is the thing. I wasn't a victim in this story. I was Michael. Sarah was a fake profile I made. Everything I told myself was a lie. I preyed on my vulnerability. I knew what I wanted to hear, what would make me fall in love, and I used it against myself, extracting every dollar I could. The loan I took out, straight into my own pocket. The other victims? It's time I finally told the truth about Sarah and me, about Sarah and Liam, and about how I became the architect of my own heartbreak, all thanks to a fake profile and a stolen photo. It started, like most bad ideas, with boredom. It was the summer after high school. My friends were all working summer jobs or going on vacation, and I was stuck at home, unemployed and restless, waiting for college to start. One night, scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled upon Liam's profile. He was gorgeous, the kind of guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. He was a surfer, judging by the photos, tanned, athletic, with this messy blonde hair and an easy smile that could melt glaciers. He lived on the coast, a few hours from my suburban hometown. I knew instantly that I had no chance with him. I was awkward, insecure, and definitely not the type of girl who hung out on beaches. So, instead of accepting that crushing reality, I did something incredibly stupid. I created a fake Instagram profile. I called her Sarah Miller. I found photos of a girl online, some model from Europe, I think, who had the kind of effortless beauty I envied. Long, flowing brown hair, piercing blue eyes, a perfect smile. I meticulously curated Sarah's profile. Photos of her hiking in scenic locations, stolen from travel blogs, pictures of her with cute animals, sourced from stock photo sites, and even a few carefully cropped selfies that made her look adventurous and fun. I made her a free spirit, a lover of nature, an artist with a passion for photography. Everything I wasn't, but desperately wanted to be. Then I followed Liam. He followed back almost immediately. And that's when the real trouble started. We began exchanging messages. At first, it was just casual stuff, commenting on each other's photos, sharing funny memes. But gradually, the conversations became more personal. I, as Sarah, told him about my dreams of becoming a wildlife photographer, about my adventures, exploring hidden waterfalls, about my deep connection to nature. He, in turn, told me about his surfing competitions, about his struggles with his family, about his dreams of traveling the world. I became addicted to our conversations. It was exhilarating to be someone else, to be someone beautiful and confident and interesting. Liam seemed genuinely drawn to Sarah. He told me I was different from other girls he'd met, that he loved my adventurous spirit and my passion for life. He flirted with me, called me beautiful, made me feel things I'd never felt before. The problem was, it wasn't really me. It was all a carefully constructed illusion, a house of cards built on a foundation of lies. As the weeks went by, Liam started suggesting we meet up. At first, I dodged the invitations, making up excuses about being out of town or too busy with photography projects. But he was persistent, and the more I talked to him, the more I wanted to meet him too. I knew it was insane, that it would only lead to disaster, but I couldn't resist the temptation. I started planning a meeting. I told him I was coming to the coast for a photography workshop and suggested we grab coffee afterward. He was ecstatic. He even offered to pick me up from the workshop and show me around. I was terrified. I spent days agonizing over what to do. I considered confessing everything, telling him the truth about Sarah, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was too afraid of losing him, of shattering the fantasy we had created. So, I decided to go through with it. I knew I couldn't show up as myself. He wouldn't recognize me, and even if he did, he'd be crushed. So, I enlisted my best friend, Chloe. Chloe was a natural blonde, with a similar body type to the girl in the photos I'd been using. I begged her to pretend to be Sarah for a few hours, just long enough to meet Liam and let him down gently. I told her I'd pay her, buy her anything she wanted. Just please help me out of this mess. To my surprise, Chloe agreed. She was always a sucker for drama, and I think she was secretly excited about the whole thing. We spent hours planning the deception. I showed her all the photos I'd used for Sarah's profile, told her about our conversations, and even wrote her a script of things to say to Liam. The day of the meeting arrived. I drove Chloe to the coast and dropped her off near the coffee shop where she was supposed to meet Liam. I was a nervous wreck, pacing back and forth in my car, waiting for her to text me. A few hours later, I got a message from Chloe. "Mission accomplished," it said. "He's a nice guy, but definitely not your type. You dodged a bullet." I was relieved, but also strangely disappointed. I had expected Liam to be heartbroken, to be angry, to feel betrayed. But according to Chloe, he had taken it pretty well. He seemed a little bummed, but he was mostly just polite and understanding. That should have been the end of it. I should have deleted the Sarah profile, moved on with my life, and learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of online deception. But I didn't. Instead, I did something even more reckless. I kept talking to Liam as Sarah. I told him I was sorry for not being more interested, but that I had really enjoyed meeting him. I told him I thought he was a great guy, and that I hoped we could still be friends. And he agreed. We continued to exchange messages, sharing our thoughts and feelings, building a deeper connection than ever before. The guilt was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop myself. I was addicted to the attention, to the validation, to the feeling of being loved, even if it was all based on a lie. Then, one night, Liam told me something that completely shattered me. He told me he was in love with me. He said he knew it was crazy, that we had only met once, but that he couldn't stop thinking about me. He said he had never felt this way about anyone before. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I was terrified of losing him. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I told him I loved him too. And that's when everything truly fell apart. We started talking about the future, about traveling together, about moving in together, about spending the rest of our lives together. Liam was making plans for us, plans that were based on a complete and utter lie. I knew I had to tell him the truth, but I was paralyzed by fear. I imagined the look on his face when he found out, the pain and betrayal in his eyes. I couldn't bear to hurt him like that. So, I kept postponing it, making excuses, clinging to the fantasy for as long as I could. But the universe has a way of catching up with you. One day, Liam sent me a link to a photography competition. He thought it would be perfect for Sarah, given my supposed passion for wildlife photography. I clicked on the link, and my heart sank. The competition was being judged by the same photographer whose photos I had been stealing for Sarah's profile. I knew it was only a matter of time before Liam found out the truth. So, I finally decided to come clean. I wrote him a long, tearful message, confessing everything. I told him about the fake profile, about the stolen photos, about the meeting with Chloe, about everything. I apologized profusely, begging him for forgiveness. I knew I didn't deserve it, but I had to try. I waited for his response, my heart pounding in my chest. Hours went by, then days. Finally, after a week of agonizing silence, I received a message from Liam. It was short and to the point. "I know," it said. "I've known for a while." I was stunned. How could he have known? And why hadn't he said anything? He went on to explain that he had recognized the model in Sarah's photos from a magazine. He had also noticed inconsistencies in my stories, things that didn't quite add up. He had even confronted Chloe after their meeting, and she had confessed everything. He said he had been playing along, waiting to see how long I would keep up the charade. He wanted to see if I would ever have the courage to tell him the truth. I was devastated. Not only had I lost Liam, but I had also humiliated myself in the process. He thought I was pathetic, a desperate liar who had tried to manipulate him for my own selfish reasons. And he was right. I deserved everything that was happening to me. I deleted the Sarah profile and cut off all contact with Liam. I haven't spoken to him since. It's been 5 years, and I still think about him sometimes. I wonder if he ever thinks about me, about Sarah. I hope he's found someone who is real, someone who is worthy of his love. As for me, I've learned my lesson. I'll never create a fake profile again, and I'll never try to be someone I'm not. I'm still awkward and insecure, but I'm also trying to be honest and authentic. It's a slow process, but I'm getting there. And maybe, one day, I'll be able to forgive myself for what I did, for the heartbreak I caused, and for the lies I told. It's time I finally told the truth. Okay, here it is. This is going to be hard to admit, even anonymously, but I need to get it out. It's a story about a catfish, but not the kind you see on TV. It's about me. I was the catfish. It started during a really low point in my life. I had just gone through a nasty breakup, lost my job due to downsizing, and basically felt like a complete failure. I was spending most of my days holed up in my apartment, scrolling endlessly through social media, comparing myself to everyone else's seemingly perfect lives. That's when I stumbled upon a profile on a dating app that caught my eye. Her name was Sarah, and her pictures were stunning. Long, flowing blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. She described herself as an artist, a free spirit who loved hiking, traveling, and trying new things. Basically, everything I wasn't at that moment. I knew instantly that someone like her would never be interested in me. I was overweight, insecure, and hadn't achieved anything remotely impressive in my life. But something inside me, some desperate need for connection, pushed me to create a fake profile. I used pictures of a model I found online, someone who looked vaguely like what I wished I looked like. I named myself Chris, and I crafted a backstory that was a slightly enhanced version of my own life, with all the boring bits replaced with more exciting details. I said I was a freelance photographer, traveled the world for assignments, and was passionate about fitness and healthy living. It was all a lie, of course, but it felt good to pretend, even for a little while. To my surprise, Sarah messaged me almost immediately. She said she loved my artistic eye and was drawn to my adventurous spirit. We started talking every day, and I found myself getting completely caught up in the fantasy. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our favorite books and movies. Sarah was intelligent, witty, and incredibly kind. She seemed to understand me in a way that no one ever had before. The more we talked, the more I fell for her. I know, it sounds crazy to fall in love with someone you've never met, someone who doesn't even know who you really are. But it happened. I started looking forward to her messages more than anything else in my day. I'd wake up early just to check my phone and see if she'd written. I'd spend hours crafting the perfect responses, trying to be the person she thought I was. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. As time went on, the guilt started to creep in. I knew what I was doing was wrong, that I was building a relationship on a foundation of lies. But I couldn't bring myself to stop. I was afraid of losing Sarah, of shattering the illusion and revealing the truth. I kept telling myself that I would tell her eventually, once we were closer, once she truly cared about me. But eventually never seemed to come. Months turned into a year, and our relationship deepened. We started talking about meeting in person. Sarah lived in another state, but she said she was planning a trip to my city soon and wanted to meet up. This was my worst nightmare come true. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade in person. There was no way I could pretend to be the handsome, adventurous photographer she thought I was. I started making excuses, saying I was too busy with work, that I was traveling for an assignment. Sarah was understanding, but I could tell she was disappointed. The guilt intensified, and I started having panic attacks. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and felt like I was constantly on the verge of a breakdown. I knew I had to end it, but I didn't know how. How do you tell someone you love that you're not who they think you are, that their entire relationship is based on a lie? I considered just disappearing, deleting my profile, and cutting off all contact. But I couldn't bring myself to do that either. Sarah didn't deserve that. She deserved the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Finally, I decided to write her a letter. A long, honest, and heart-wrenching letter where I confessed everything. I told her about my insecurities, my loneliness, and my desperation for connection. I explained how I created the fake profile, how I fell in love with her, and how deeply sorry I was for deceiving her. I poured my heart out, holding nothing back. I hit send, and then I waited. The silence was deafening. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing from Sarah. I assumed the worst, that she hated me, that she never wanted to speak to me again. Part of me felt like I deserved it. I had hurt her deeply, and I had to accept the consequences of my actions. Then, one evening, I received a message from her. My heart leaped into my throat as I opened it. It was short and simple. "I need time to process this. Can we talk on the phone tomorrow?" The next day was the longest of my life. I spent the entire day pacing my apartment, rehearsing what I would say, and bracing myself for the worst. When Sarah finally called, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the pain in it. She said she was hurt and confused, that she couldn't believe I had lied to her for so long. She asked me why I did it, what I was hoping to achieve. I explained everything again, trying to convey the depth of my regret and remorse. To my surprise, Sarah didn't hang up on me. She listened patiently as I poured out my soul. When I was finished, she was silent for a long time. Then, she said something that I never expected. "I'm angry and hurt, but I also understand. I've been there, feeling insecure and alone. I can see why you did what you did." She paused, then continued, "I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, but I'm willing to try. I care about you, Chris, or whoever you really are. But you have to promise me that you'll be honest with me from now on. No more lies, no more pretending." I was stunned. I couldn't believe that she was willing to give me a second chance. I promised her that I would be honest, that I would never lie to her again. I told her that I would do anything to earn back her trust. We talked for hours that night, peeling back the layers of my fake persona and revealing the real me. It was terrifying, but also liberating. I told her about my struggles with weight, my lack of confidence, and my feelings of inadequacy. I showed her pictures of myself, the real me, not the Photoshop version I had used on the dating app. Sarah listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and support. Slowly, cautiously, we started rebuilding our relationship. This time, based on honesty and authenticity. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of anger, and moments when I thought we wouldn't make it. But we kept talking, kept communicating, and kept working on building a genuine connection. I started going to therapy to address my underlying insecurities and learn how to be more confident in myself. I started working out and eating healthier, not to become someone else, but to become the best version of myself. And Sarah was there for me every step of the way, offering unwavering support and encouragement. 2 years later, I flew out to meet Sarah in person. It was the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. I was terrified that she wouldn't like the real me, that the connection we had built online wouldn't translate to real life. But as soon as I saw her at the airport, all my fears melted away. She was even more beautiful in person, and her smile was even more radiant. We hugged for what felt like an eternity, and in that moment, I knew that everything was going to be okay. The next few days were magical. We explored her city, went hiking in the mountains, and spent hours talking and laughing. I felt like I had finally found my place in the world, that I had finally found someone who loved me for who I truly was. We've been together ever since. We're planning to get married next year. I know that what I did was wrong, that I hurt Sarah deeply, but I also believe that something good came out of it. It forced me to confront my own insecurities and to become a better person. It taught me the importance of honesty and authenticity in relationships, and it led me to the love of my life. I still feel guilty about what I did, but I'm also grateful for the second chance that Sarah gave me. I know that I'll never fully be able to erase the past, but I'm committed to building a future with her based on trust, honesty, and unwavering love. This is my confession. I was a catfish, and I found love in the most unexpected way. I need to confess something that's been eating away at me for the better part of a decade. It's a story about deception, loneliness, and the tangled web of a catfish love story that spiraled way out of control. It started like any other online romance, or at least, that's how I justified it to myself for so long. Back then, I wasn't anyone. I was lost, invisible, and desperate for connection. I was in my early 20s, working a dead-end job, living in my parents' basement, and utterly devoid of any real-world romantic prospects. I spent most of my free time online, escaping into virtual worlds where I could be someone else, someone better. That's where I met Alyssa. Alyssa was everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, artistic, and breathtakingly beautiful. Her profile picture showed a girl with fiery red hair, piercing green eyes, and a mischievous smile that could melt glaciers. She claimed to be a struggling musician living in Los Angeles, chasing her dreams while working as a barista. We connected instantly, bonding over our shared love of indie music, obscure films, and sarcastic humor. The conversations flowed effortlessly. We talked for hours every day, sharing our hopes, our fears, our deepest secrets. I told her about my mundane life, my insecurities, my longing for something more. And she, in turn, captivated me with stories of her vibrant life in LA, her gigs at smoky bars, her encounters with quirky artists and eccentric personalities. I fell hard and I fell fast. Of course, there were red flags. Looking back, they're glaringly obvious. She was always hesitant to video chat, claiming her webcam was broken or that she was having a bad hair day. She was vague about her location, always somewhere in LA, but never specific. And she never sent me any new pictures, always recycling the same few images from her profile. But I was blinded by infatuation. I wanted so desperately to believe that this amazing woman was actually interested in me, that I ignored the warning signs and rationalized away my doubts. I told myself that she was just shy, or that she valued our emotional connection over physical appearance. I was a fool, a willing participant in my own deception. The truth is, Alyssa wasn't Alyssa. She was me. I created that profile, stole those pictures from a random Instagram account, and fabricated that entire persona. I was lonely, insecure, and terrified of putting myself out there as myself. So I invented someone I thought was desirable, someone who could attract the kind of attention and affection I craved. It started as a harmless fantasy, a way to escape my miserable reality, but it quickly spiraled into something much darker and more complicated. I became addicted to the attention, the validation, the feeling of being loved and desired. I convinced myself that I was doing it for the right reasons, that I was simply creating a safe space for genuine connection. But deep down, I knew I was lying. I was deceiving not only Alyssa, but also myself. The charade went on for years. We exchanged thousands of messages, shared countless virtual dates, and even planned a real-life meeting that never actually happened. Every time I tried to end it, to confess the truth and face the consequences, I chickened out. I was too afraid of losing her, of shattering the illusion and revealing the pathetic reality of who I really was. The guilt gnawed at me constantly. I knew I was hurting her, that I was building a relationship on a foundation of lies. But I couldn't bring myself to stop. I was trapped in a cycle of deception, driven by my own insecurities and my desperate need for connection. Over the years, Alyssa became more than just a catfish profile. She became a part of me, an extension of my own personality. I poured my hopes, my dreams, my vulnerabilities into that character, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. I started to believe my own lies, to identify with the person I had created. Then, a few years ago, things took a turn for the worse. Alyssa started talking about her struggles with depression and anxiety. She described feeling lost and hopeless, questioning her life choices and her ability to pursue her dreams. And I, the architect of her fictional world, felt responsible. I knew that her pain was, in a way, a reflection of my own. I had created this persona, this illusion of a perfect life, and now it was crumbling under the weight of its own falsehood. I realized that my deception had not only hurt her, but it had also hurt me. I tried to be supportive, to offer words of encouragement and advice, but it felt hollow, like I was just reciting lines from a script. I knew that I couldn't truly help her, not while I was still hiding behind a mask. That's when I decided to end it. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew that confessing the truth would be painful and potentially devastating, but I couldn't live with the guilt any longer. I owed it to her and to myself to finally be honest. I wrote a long, heartfelt message, pouring out my soul and confessing everything. I told her about my insecurities, my loneliness, my reasons for creating the Alyssa profile. I apologized for the pain I had caused, for the years of deception and manipulation. And then I waited. The response came a few days later. It was short, but it was devastating. "I knew it," she wrote. "I always knew something was off. I just didn't want to believe it." She didn't say anything else. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She didn't even ask any questions. She simply acknowledged the truth and then disappeared. I tried to reach out to her, to apologize again, to explain myself further, but she blocked me on all platforms. She wanted nothing to do with me, and I couldn't blame her. The aftermath was brutal. I spiraled into a deep depression, consumed by guilt and self-loathing. I lost my appetite, my sleep, my ability to function. I felt like I had destroyed someone's life, and in a way I had. I spent months in therapy, trying to understand my motivations and to process the pain of my actions. I learned about the psychology of catfishing, the underlying insecurities and unmet needs that drive people to create false identities online. I also learned about the importance of self-acceptance, of embracing my flaws and vulnerabilities, of being honest with myself and with others. It was a long and difficult journey, but it was necessary. It's been several years since I confessed the truth to Alyssa. I still think about her often, wondering how she's doing, hoping that she's found happiness and healing. I know that I can never fully undo the damage I caused, but I can learn from my mistakes and strive to be a better person. I haven't catfished anyone since. I've even started putting myself out there in the real world, joining social groups, attending events, and trying to make genuine connections. It's scary, and it's uncomfortable, but it's also rewarding. I still struggle with insecurities and self-doubt, but I'm learning to accept myself for who I am, flaws and all. And I'm learning to be honest with others, even when it's difficult. Confessing this secret has been incredibly cathartic. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I know that I can never fully escape the consequences of my actions, but I can move forward with a clearer conscience and a renewed commitment to honesty and authenticity. I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others avoid making the same mistakes. Catfishing is not a harmless game. It's a form of deception that can have devastating consequences for both the perpetrator and the victim. If you're struggling with loneliness, insecurity, or a desire to escape your reality, please seek help. Talk to a therapist, join a support group, or reach out to a trusted friend or family member. There are people who care about you and want to help you through your struggles. And if you're tempted to create a fake profile online, please reconsider. It's not worth the pain and the guilt that will inevitably follow. Instead, focus on building genuine connections with real people based on honesty, authenticity, and mutual respect. The truth may be scary, but it's always better than a lie. Trust me, I know. I lived the lie for far too long, and it almost destroyed me. Now, I'm finally ready to embrace the truth and to move forward with my life. Okay, here it goes. This is hard. I've been holding on to this for almost a decade, and the longer I wait, the heavier it gets. It's about a relationship, a love story, except it was built on a foundation of lies. I was a catfish, not the kind you see on TV, try to scam someone out of money, but still a catfish. Maybe even worse, because I built a whole fake life around it, and someone fell in love with that life. It started innocently enough, I guess. I was 16, hopelessly awkward and painfully shy. High school was a social minefield, and I spent most of my time online, hiding behind a screen. I found solace in online forums dedicated to video games. It was a place where I could actually be myself, or at least, a version of myself that I felt comfortable showing. One day, I stumbled upon a thread where people were sharing pictures of their pets. I didn't have any pets at the time, but I had always wanted a dog. I found a picture online of this adorable golden retriever puppy, big brown eyes and floppy ears, and posted it, claiming he was my new best friend, Buddy. People loved him. They commented on how cute he was, asked about his personality, and I, caught up in the attention, started making things up. Buddy loved to chase squirrels. Buddy slept at the foot of my bed. Buddy was the smartest dog in the world. Then I got a private message from someone, a girl named Sarah. She said she loved Buddy and asked if I had any more pictures. We started talking, and it was easy. Easier than talking to anyone in real life. Sarah was funny, smart, and kind. She shared my love of video games and had this infectious enthusiasm that drew me in. We messaged each other every day. Then we started texting, and eventually, we were talking on the phone for hours each night. I created this whole persona for myself. I wasn't just some awkward teenager anymore. I was Jake, a confident, witty, and adventurous guy who loved dogs and video games. I used pictures of a guy I found on a stock photo website, a guy who looked nothing like me, but fit the image I wanted to project. Over time, Jake became more real to me than my actual self. I started believing in the lies I was telling. I fell for Sarah hard, and she, as far as I could tell, fell for Jake too. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. We made plans to meet someday, once we were both old enough to travel. The problem was, the longer we talked, the harder it became to maintain the lie. Sarah started asking for video calls. She wanted to see Buddy, wanted to see my room, wanted to see me. I always had an excuse ready. My webcam was broken. I was visiting family. I had a bad cold. The excuses became more elaborate, more ridiculous, but she never questioned them. She trusted me completely. That's what made it so much worse. I knew I had to tell her the truth. I knew it was the right thing to do. But I was terrified of losing her. She was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. So I kept lying. I kept pretending to be someone I wasn't. A year passed. Then another. Our relationship deepened. We were practically a couple, even though we had never met in person. We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries with virtual gifts and heartfelt messages. We supported each other through tough times. She was there for me when my grandfather passed away, even though Jake's grandfather never actually existed. I was there for her when she had a falling out with her best friend. The guilt was constant, a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew I was hurting her, that I was building our relationship on a foundation of deceit. But I was too weak to stop. Every time I thought about telling her the truth, I would picture her face, the hurt and betrayal in her eyes, and I would chicken out. Then came the day she announced she was moving. Her family was relocating across the country, to a city just a few hours away from where Jake supposedly lived. This was it. This was my chance to come clean. I could tell her the truth, meet her in person, and maybe, just maybe, she would forgive me. Or I could continue the lie and risk losing her forever. I decided to do it. I was finally going to tell her everything. I spent days crafting the perfect message, rehearsing what I would say. I planned to tell her about my insecurities, my fears, and how I had created Jake as a way to protect myself. I hoped she would understand, that she would see the real me beneath the lies. But the day before her move, I got a message from her that changed everything. She was excited. She said she couldn't wait to finally meet me, to see Buddy in person, to start our real life together. She even included a picture of a plane ticket. She was coming to visit me as soon as she settled in. I froze. I couldn't do it. I couldn't face her. I couldn't let her see the real me, the awkward, insecure kid who had been hiding behind a screen for years. I panicked. I did the only thing I could think of. I deleted my profile. I blocked her number. I disappeared completely. I vanished from her life without a trace. I know it was cowardly, cruel even, but I couldn't face the consequences of my actions. I convinced myself that it was better to disappear than to hurt her even more. I told myself that she was better off without me, that she deserved someone who was real, someone who could give her the love she deserved. Years have passed since then. I've tried to move on, to build a new life for myself. I've finished college, started a career, and even had a few relationships. But the guilt never goes away. It's always there, lurking in the shadows, reminding me of what I did. I often wonder what happened to Sarah. Did she ever find out the truth? Did she hate me? Did she eventually move on and find happiness? I hope she did. I hope she found someone who loved her for who she was, someone who never lied to her. I know I don't deserve her forgiveness, but I hope that someday, somehow, she can understand why I did what I did. I know it's not an excuse, but I was just a scared kid who made a terrible mistake. I've never told anyone this story before. Not my family, not my friends, not even my therapists. It's been my dirty little secret, a burden I've carried alone for far too long. But I can't keep it inside anymore. I need to confess. I need to acknowledge the pain I caused. Maybe, just maybe, by sharing my story, I can find some peace, some measure of redemption. I know this doesn't make up for what I did. It doesn't undo the hurt I caused Sarah, but it's a start. It's a way of taking responsibility for my actions, and it's a way of finally facing the truth, no matter how painful it may be. I'm truly sorry, Sarah. I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I know I'll never forgive myself. Here goes nothing. I've been holding on to this for almost a decade, and the weight of it is crushing me. It's a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on TV. It's darker, messier, and it's all my fault. Back in 2014, I was a lonely college freshman. Big school, didn't know anyone, and spent most nights holed up in my dorm room playing video games. I was awkward, insecure, and desperately craving connection. That's when I stumbled upon this online forum dedicated to a niche interest we'll call historical roleplay. People would create characters, usually based on figures from history or mythology, and interact with each other in elaborate storylines. It was dorky, sure, but it was also a way to escape reality and pretend to be someone else. I created a character named Alistair, a brooding, Byronic hero type with a tragic backstory and a penchant for writing poetry. I used a picture of a ridiculously handsome model that I found online, a guy who looked nothing like me. Instantly, I was getting attention I'd never experienced before. People were drawn to Alistair's mysterious persona, his eloquent language, and his undeniable charm, which was all borrowed from the internet, of course. Then I met Serafina. She was playing a character named Isolde, a strong, independent woman with a sharp wit and a hidden vulnerability. Her writing was incredible, evocative, intelligent, and deeply emotional. We started interacting in the forum, our characters drawn to each other like moths to a flame. Alistair and Isolde had this intense, passionate connection, fueled by shared ideals, intellectual sparring, and a mutual understanding of each other's hidden pain. Soon, the roleplay spilled over into private messages. We started talking about our real lives, our hopes, our fears, and our dreams. I told her, or rather, pretended to tell her, about my childhood, my love of literature, and my struggles with feeling like an outsider. I carefully crafted a version of myself that was more interesting, more confident, and more attractive than the real me. Serafina was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. She was intelligent, creative, funny, and incredibly kind. She listened to my problems without judgment, offered insightful advice, and made me feel seen and understood in a way I never had before. We talked for hours every day, sharing everything and nothing. I was falling in love with Serafina, or at least, with the image of her that I had created in my head. The problem was, I knew it was all built on a foundation of lies. I wasn't Alistair. I wasn't the handsome, charismatic poet she thought I was. I was just a lonely, insecure kid pretending to be someone else. The guilt was eating me alive, but I couldn't bring myself to confess. I was terrified of losing her, of shattering the illusion and revealing the pathetic reality underneath. So I kept up the charade, digging myself deeper and deeper into the hole. We started talking about meeting in person. Serafina lived in another state, but we made plans to visit each other during summer break. The thought filled me with dread. How could I possibly meet her when I wasn't the person she thought I was? I came up with excuses, procrastinated, and eventually convinced her that it wasn't the right time. But the pressure was mounting. She wanted to take our relationship to the next level, to move beyond online interactions and into the real world. I knew I couldn't keep lying forever. One night, after weeks of agonizing over it, I decided to tell her the truth. I wrote a long, rambling message, explaining everything. I confessed that I wasn't Alistair, that I had used a fake picture, and that I had fabricated parts of my personality. I poured my heart out, begging for her forgiveness and explaining how desperately I had fallen in love with her. Then I hit send. The silence that followed was deafening. I waited for hours, refreshing the page every few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, a reply came. It was short, cold, and devastating. "I can't believe you lied to me for so long," she wrote. "I thought you were different. I thought we had something real. I never want to hear from you again." Then she blocked me. Just like that, it was over. The connection we had built, the love I thought we shared, vanished in an instant. I was heartbroken, ashamed, and filled with self-loathing. I knew I deserved it, but it didn't make it any easier. I deleted my Alistair profile, left the forum, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. But the memory of Serafina and the guilt of my deception haunted me for years. I told myself it was a lesson learned, a youthful indiscretion that I could move on from. But I never truly forgot her. Over the years, I tried dating other people, but I always held back, afraid of repeating the same mistakes. I was so scarred by the experience that I struggled to be vulnerable and authentic in relationships. I carried this secret with me like a lead weight, afraid to reveal it to anyone, even my closest friends. Then, a few weeks ago, something happened that forced me to confront my past. I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from a mutual friend of Serafina's. It was a picture of her, older, wiser, but still beautiful. I clicked on her profile and saw that she was now a successful writer, publishing novels and essays. I felt a surge of emotions, guilt, regret, and a strange sense of pride in her accomplishments. I wanted to reach out to her, to apologize again, to tell her how much I regretted what I had done. But I knew it was a terrible idea. What good would it do to dredge up the past and reopen old wounds? Still, the urge was overwhelming. I spent days agonizing over it, wondering if I should try to contact her or just let it go. Finally, I decided to write this confession. It's not a substitute for a real apology, but it's the closest I can get for now. Serafina, if you ever happen to read this, I want you to know that I am truly sorry for what I did. I was young and foolish, and I made a terrible mistake. You deserved better than to be lied to and manipulated. I hope you have found happiness and success in your life, and I wish you all the best. And to anyone else who might be tempted to create a fake identity online, please learn from my experience. It's not worth the pain and heartache it will cause. Honesty and authenticity are the foundations of any meaningful relationship. Don't try to be someone you're not. Embrace who you are, flaws and all. Because in the end, the only person you're really hurting is yourself. I still feel shame about this, and it is hard to get past the fact that I lied to her and strung her along. It is hard to just ignore and move on. It's been almost a decade. I feel pathetic for not being over this. For years, it's a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on TV. This one ended with a body buried in the woods behind my grandpa's farm. I was 19, fresh out of high school, working a dead-end job at the local gas station. I was bored, lonely, and desperate for something exciting to happen. That's when I met Sarah online. It started on a forum for fans of this obscure indie band. She had the same taste in music as me, the same cynical sense of humor, the same yearning for something more than small-town life. We messaged each other constantly, then moved to texting, then late-night phone calls that stretched into the early morning. Sarah was everything I thought I wanted. She was smart, funny, beautiful, at least according to the picture she sent. Long, flowing blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. She was studying photography at a prestigious art school in Chicago, living this glamorous, exciting life that seemed a million miles away from my own. Of course, there were red flags. She never wanted to video chat, always claiming her webcam was broken or that she was too busy with school projects. She was vague about her daily routine, her friends, her living situation, but I was so infatuated, so caught up in the fantasy, that I ignored them. I told myself she was just shy, just private. I convinced myself that our connection was real, that we were destined to be together. After a few months of talking, Sarah said she wanted to meet in person. I was ecstatic. We planned a weekend trip to a cabin in the woods, halfway between my town and Chicago. It was a secluded spot, perfect for a romantic getaway. I took time off work, borrowed my grandpa's truck, and packed my bags, my heart pounding with anticipation. The drive was agonizingly long. I kept picturing Sarah waiting for me at the cabin, imagining our first kiss, our first embrace. When I finally arrived, the cabin was empty. I waited for hours, checking my phone every few minutes, my excitement slowly turning into dread. Sarah wasn't answering my calls or texts. As darkness fell, I started to panic. Had something happened to her? Had she changed her mind? Was this all a cruel joke? Around midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of Sarah, but it wasn't the Sarah I knew from the photos. This Sarah was overweight, with greasy hair and acne scars. She looked nothing like the girl I'd fallen in love with. The text read, "Looking for someone?" My blood ran cold. I called the number, but it went straight to voicemail. I felt sick to my stomach, betrayed and humiliated. I wanted to turn around and drive home, to forget the whole thing ever happened. But then I got another text. "Come to the old mill, if you want to meet the real me." The old mill was a crumbling ruin a few miles from the cabin. It was abandoned years ago, rumored to be haunted. I knew I shouldn't go, but curiosity and a desperate need for answers pulled me forward. I drove to the mill, my hand shaking on the steering wheel. The place was even creepier in the dark, the shadows stretching and twisting like grotesque figures. I parked the truck and walked toward the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. "Sarah, is that you?" A figure emerged from the shadows. It was the woman from the picture, the one who wasn't Sarah. She was even bigger in person, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. "You came," she said, her voice raspy and unfamiliar. I'm not Sarah, she continued. My name is Brenda. Brenda proceeded to tell me a story that twisted my mind into knots. She explained that she had created the Sarah persona to escape her own miserable life. She was lonely, insecure, and desperate for connection. She had stolen the photos from a random girl's Instagram account, creating a fake identity that was everything she wished she could be. She said she'd been watching me for months, learning my secrets, my fears, my desires. She knew everything about me. And then she said something that made my skin crawl. I love you. I was disgusted, repulsed. I told her she was crazy, that she needed help. I turned to leave, but she blocked my path. You're not going anywhere, she said, her voice hardening. We're meant to be together. I know you feel it too. I tried to push past her, but she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. We struggled, and I pushed her away. She stumbled backward, tripped over a loose board, and fell. Her head hit a sharp piece of metal sticking out of the ground. There was a sickening thud, and she went limp. I froze, staring at her lifeless body in disbelief. It was an accident, I told myself. Un horrible, tragique accident. But I knew that wouldn't matter to the police. They would see a young woman dead, and me, the guy who drove her to a secluded location after being catfished. I panicked. The same primal fear that had gripped me all those years ago came flooding back. I couldn't go to prison. I couldn't ruin my life. So I made a choice, a terrible, unforgivable choice. I dragged Brenda's body to my grandpa's farm. It was the only place I knew where I could be sure no one would find her. I dug a shallow grave in the woods behind the barn, buried her, and covered the spot with leaves and branches. I drove home in a daze, my mind numb with shock and guilt. I scrubbed the truck clean, burned my clothes, and tried to erase every trace of what I had done. The next few weeks were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. I kept expecting the police to show up at my door, but they never did. Brenda was reported missing, but the investigation went nowhere. She was just another lonely woman who had vanished without a trace. I told myself I would turn myself in eventually, that I would confess and accept the consequences. But I never did. The fear was too strong, the thought of prison too terrifying. I moved away from my hometown a few years later, hoping to escape the memories. But they followed me, like a dark cloud hanging over my head. I tried to build a new life, to find happiness, but it was impossible. The guilt was always there, gnawing at me, reminding me of what I had done. I've never told anyone about this, not even my therapist. The shame is too great, the crime too monstrous. I know I deserve to be punished, but I'm too afraid to face the consequences. So I live with this secret, this burden, every single day. It's a slow, agonizing form of self-torture. I don't know why I'm confessing this now. Maybe it's because the guilt has finally become too much to bear. Maybe it's because I'm tired of living a lie. Or maybe it's because I know that one day, the truth will come out, and I'll finally have to pay for what I did. All I know is that I can't keep this inside any longer. I'm a murderer, and I've gotten away with it for too long. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But maybe, just maybe, by sharing this, I can finally find a small measure of peace. The weight has gotten lighter. I am still guilty,